Hello and welcome to another episode of Troubleshooting Zen Study and Practice, and this is number 41. So this time we have a question about the practice of giving myself into what is being done. And the question reads, what is the difference between the Zen practice of giving myself into what is being done and being mindful of what I am doing? Very fair question and a very good question, and it's always good to come back to really what when I first started Zen training, I was told that the heart of Zen training, what it all boils down to, is this practice, the practice of giving myself wholeheartedly into what at this moment is being done. And this phrase, giving myself into, was a phrase that was coined by Master Daiyu Myokyo, known in life as Myokyo-ni, who I've mentioned many times. She trained in Daitokuji in Kyoto, one of the great Zen monasteries in Japan, the Rinzai Zen line, and she came back and she used this phrase with her English-speaking students to give myself wholeheartedly into what is being done. And she tended not to use the term mindfulness. In fact, to be honest, she had a bit of a downer on the term. She didn't like the terms mind. She preferred to use the term heart. And so I tend to do the same in the Dharma talks I give. And she didn't like the term mindfulness either. And there's a reason. Obviously, there's a good reason for this. She felt it gave the wrong connotation, and she was at great pains to point out what the centrality of the practice was trying to achieve, trying to do, and so she was very careful with the crafting of the words that she used. She was a German-speaking Austrian, obviously. That was her native tongue, but she had a tremendous grasp of the English language, and so she was always very careful with the sorts of words that she used herself. And so perhaps it just might be useful to explain where that term mind and mindfulness came from. Obviously, mindfulness and or being mindful or mind were, are English words that long predate the introduction of Buddhism, but obviously they did become associated with it, and this was through the works of the sort of translator and Indologist Rhys David back in the early part of the 20th century, who was working with the Pali Text Society. If I've got that right, I'm pretty certain he was. But he was an important figure in the translation movement of scriptures, Buddhist scriptures, into English. And he used this word, which was a translation of the term Sati, the Pali term Sati. I've used the name of the sutra, the Satipatthana, which sutta, I should say, that's the Pali term. Sutta is means scripture in Pali. Sutra means scripture in Sanskrit. These are the two languages that Buddhism, a lot of the Indian Buddhism was written in, of course. And so he coined this term mind and mindfulness because it was current at the time in this very early part, sort of pre-1920, in the early part of the 20th century. Having a clear mind or a well forged or well educated mind, a very rational mind, was seen as the epitome of mental training here in the West. And so it seemed fitting to use that term for the translation of the term Sati. And Sati means something akin to awareness and recollection and so forth. But actually, even these terms, even the term awareness, is certainly Master Daiyu considered that was a better translation than mindful. And the reason that she didn't like mindful is that part of the problem was that if we are mindful about something, it might give the connotation that we are to think about what we are doing. And one of the pitfalls that people can fall into when they begin to practice mindfulness, in scare quotes, is that somehow I must internally comment on what I am doing. If I'm drinking a glass of water, I am now picking the glass up, I'm lifting it up towards my lips, I'm pursing my lips, and I'm tipping the glass and trying to drink. Well, I mean, the chances are I'm going to spill most of that water down the front because I'm obsessing so much about talking to myself, using my internal dialogue to narrate what I am doing, whilst the doing itself becomes neglected. And so what we end up with is this split between this internal narrator and what the body itself is actually doing. And this is why Miyokyo or Master Dayu didn't like that term, that it exacerbated the split between the mental function that is commenting on the physical function. Whereas actually what we are really looking for in Sati is this state of samadhi. And this is a term that's used that is translated as oneness. And oneness, being at one with. And this being at one with is a much closer term to what we are talking about. The term samadhi means to join together two things that have come apart. And what's being joined together is the consciousness of the heart, and what in fact is being done. So to even the use of the term awareness can also mislead, doesn't quite have the right connotation, and for her it wasn't sufficient. Not because there's anything wrong with awareness, that's absolutely where we're going, but the thing is that awareness is not something that I can do by an act of will. I am not aware. Awareness arises naturally in the process of samadhi, and samadhi is the entryway into samadhi is to give myself into what at this moment is being done, particularly on the physical plane, particularly on the physical side of things. And so hence why in Zen training there is always a great emphasis on physical work. For example, it doesn't necessarily have to be, hours of sweeping or anything. Most of the things we do with the body, even just simple things, washing up, making a cup of tea, opening and closing doors, all that sort of stuff. There is that whole physical side to it. But what she really wanted to emphasize here was that the practice, the central state of the practice is an embodied one, that the body is taken in, and that is because the body is often ignored. That feeling of I, and the Buddha was very clear that in the Four Noble Truths, the cause of attachments is, the cause of suffering are what are known as the sticky attachments, that consciousness gets attached to things, particularly it gets attached to notions, and the central notion that it is the real obstacle is the attachment to the notion of I, me, mine, myself. Hence the Buddha's teaching of anatta, or no I, and that this the realization of no I is the simultaneous release from the cause of suffering as well. So that's how those things sort of string together. The cause of suffering is the separation of the consciousness into a feeling of I, and obviously that's opposed by everything else, the other, and the dropping away of that, the letting go of that, or forgetting of that, the reunification of heart and body and mind and everything, is the release from that suffering, is the release from the cause of suffering. So this embodiment is extremely important. Now, this all sounds very theoretical at the moment, and that's simply because I'm painting a picture here. But there's nothing as good as testing the pudding by eating it, and so in the end of it, that is what we have to do. So, again, when I first started in the Zen training, I kept hearing this phrase. So just give yourself wholeheartedly into what at this moment is being done. Well, how do I do that? Well, just give yourself into it. Put the body into it, and we'd be told this. Bow and just practice really living in the body, being in the body, be at home in the body, come back to the body. And when the thoughts carry me away, when I get lost in daydreams and the internal narrator, to just come back into the body. And if I'm walking down the street, then be in the body as it walks down the street. Don't be ghosting around in where I'm going and all this sort of thing and what happened just before, whatever. As soon as the awareness, notice, as soon as the awareness comes in, meaning comes into the heart of awareness, that I have once again been carried off into some thought stream, then immediately jump back into the body, into the here and now. And why do we do that? Because it's a counterpoint. The physical body is a counterpoint to all that mental activity. Now, the Buddha described the consciousness of the human being, i.e., as a human being, as a subject, as a subjective experience, we can experience basically two landscapes, if you like. There's the physical landscape, the one which is the context of the body, and also where the body is, in the room, in living in London, and wherever you happen to be, and what we are sensorily, physically aware of. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, touch, and smell. Those are the 5 physical senses of the body that it makes contact with the world with. On the other side, there is also the mental landscape, the inner landscape, with its thoughts and its imaginings and its feelings and its volitions and all those things that you can look up in the Abhidharma, because in the Abhidharma it carefully lists all the different elements and aspects of consciousness, both on the physical side and particularly on the mental side. This is where it's particularly important, because our training takes place in this whole realm. So consciousness expands over these 2 realms. This is what's known as the psychophysical organism, and the Buddha formulated this as what's in a teaching called the 5 skandhas. And skandha means a heap or accumulation. Don't have to worry about that, what those heaps are or aggregates are right now, but just to know that there are these 5 categories that the subject can be conscious of as a human being. And the first one is called rupa, and rupa means form, hence why we use the term Buddha rupa to refer to a Buddha statue, say on an altar or on a shrine. But rupa more generally means the physical form. So our physical bodies are also rupa as well, and that goes for all physical things. All physical things have rupa. Other living things like cats and dogs and bees and birds and oak trees and grass and so forth, they also have rupa. They have their own rupa. And rupa is translated as form, of course, doesn't just mean the atoms or the molecules that make up that form, but also the way that form expresses itself. So, such as a cat, expresses itself as a cat. It does certain things like climb trees, chase birds, that sort of thing. And a dog, the same. Will chase cars and chase cats, and will bark and will chew a bone. So those are so those forms also governs the behaviour of the organism as well. So slightly expanded, but it refers to the physical side of things, including physical behaviour as well. So you have the physical form of things, that is their body as well, and then you have the other 4 skandhas, which are the psychological or mental factors. That's Vedana, which governs feeling or sensation. Those of you who know this term will know that it means pleasant feelings and unpleasant feelings. Then there's perceptions, samjna, as it's called. That's the faculty of recognition. The fourth one are the samskaras. These are known as the mental volitional activities. This includes things like thinking, daydreaming, imagining, also feelings, as in our emotional life as well, our desires and our fears and all those sorts of things, our volitions as well, what we want and what we hope for, what we don't want as well, our ambition. And the fifth one is known as Vigneana, which simply means sense consciousness. And Vigneana is the consciousness of the four preceding skandhas. So consciousness of form, consciousness of feeling sensation, consciousness of perception, and consciousness of mental volitional activities. So that's how the Buddha described the human being in its holistic physical and mental side. So what we might call a psychophysical organism, if you like, just to simplify those five down to two. And as you know, if we ask ourselves the questions, where do I spend most of my time? Well, I think for most of us, we spend most of our time in our daydreams and thoughts. And in fact, we're addicted to them. You know, like people are addicted to social media. We're all addicted to scrolling down our mental volitional activities. That's where we are. We're thinking about, you know, even when we're walking down the street, where I'm going, what's it going to be like, what will happen to me, what do I want to happen, what am I worried about, if someone says this, how shall I respond, you know, what do I think of it, all those weighings and evaluations and judgments, you know, we spending our time in this milieu, and we are not so conscious of the first skandha. And the first skandha, that rupa, the thing about that first skandha is that unlike all those judgments and those thoughts of the future and the past and so forth that are going on in the samskaras, we are always in the present, in the body. In rupa, we are always in the here and now. So therefore, if we want to live in the here and now, and after all, you know, we do live in the here and now anyway, but if we want to be conscious of living in the here and now, and if we want to experience the here and now in its fullest aspect, then that is the side that needs developing, because that's the side that for most of us is still, to a great capacity, underdeveloped. We actually collude not to live in it, except when we except under certain conditions, which I'll go into in a moment. So this is why in the Zen training, Myokyoni used to use that phrase, to give myself wholeheartedly into what at this moment is being done. And what is being done is where the body is. You know, right now, you know, I'm sat in a chair talking into a headpiece, into a microphone, with a pair of headphones on, recording this talk. And I don't know, wherever you are, what you're doing. Chances are, you know, you're listening to this. Maybe you're walking down the street. Maybe you're on a bus. Maybe you're listening to it in the car. Maybe you're listening to it sitting in an armchair, just listening to it. Maybe you're sitting, listening to this whilst doing the ironing, or some other activity. But it's interesting, isn't it? You know, if I am doing this, if I am listening to this whilst I'm, say, doing the ironing, then where exactly is the heart of the attention? Is it with the ironing, which is what the body is doing, or is it, you know, listening and understanding to this talk, which is using the mental faculties? Of course, we can do both. You know, we're able to do both. But when I first started doing this practice, the advice that I was given was to try and learn to do one thing at a time, and that one thing should be staying with the body. So, you know, if I was ironing, don't listen to talks on Zen. Don't also listen to music or watch TV or do all those other things. Just take some time out of that and really live in the body as the ironing is being done, or the washing up, or, the hoovering or whatever, or the making the meal or the cup of coffee or whatever it might be. And until we really learn to be much more at home in the body, um, and that way we are developing this capacity to be in the body, which is, as I've said, always in the here and now. And therefore, if we give ourselves into what the body is doing, then we are immediately back in the here and now and living it more fully, as fully as we are able to give ourselves into the body, is also as fully we are able to live into the present moment and experience it too. Those two things are proportionate to each other. So, which is not to say that, oh gosh, I can never watch, I can never listen to the radio whilst I'm doing the ironing. But it is quite a useful exercise, and I'll suggest this to you all, to try taking some time out from that and really learning to live in the body. Because unless we do this, the Zen training will not go. And that was really impressed on me. Without this form training, this practice cannot be done. And I was told that by several high-ups in Zen. And I have to say, it is true. It is true. I've been in Zen training for over 30 years now, and I have to say that the Zen training goes much better when I'm giving myself into that practice of what at this moment the body is being done. Which again is not to say that I don't read on the bus. I certainly do, or on the train or whatever. But I did take time out, and sometimes still do take time out to just, when sitting on a bus, just sit on a bus, look out the window, and just be present. Just give myself into that form of sitting, and it really does work. And again, proof of the pudding. Try it for yourselves. So that sort of sets that sort of background as to, and hopefully sort of answers that question as to why there is that difference between using the phrase to give myself wholeheartedly into what at this moment's being done and being mindfulness of. And certainly if there's a sort of I am mindful or mindfulness of what I am doing, if there's any feeling of I there, then that giving in is not wholehearted. It's not 100%. Because when I'm wholeheartedly given into what at this moment is being done, that feeling of I is gone. That's how we know it. We don't necessarily know it at that instant, but when we reflect back on it, we realize that in fact the sense of myself wasn't there. And again, the example I like to use, is if you've got a hobby that you're really keen on. So, for example, I had an uncle who was a really keen model builder. He used to make model aircraft and fly them, and he would spend hours, with us cutting bits of balsa wood and, making these sort of, aircraft which he would then go and fly. And he could spend hours doing that. And from the outside, it would be 3 hours. But for him, it probably felt like an hour, barely an hour, or even timeless. He actually didn't have a sense of time passing because there was no I there to check the clock. When I am wholeheartedly given in that state of samadhi, there is a sense of eternity. There is a sense of timelessness that arises, and it's really difficult to say, am I there? No, I mean, this is, yes, there's thinking going on and so forth, but all my cares are not there. That's why we like our hobbies, because they lift us out of that. Because in that situation where where I'm doing something that I really enjoy, that I really want to do, then quite naturally I give myself wholeheartedly into it. Think about if you play sports or you like skateboarding or whatever. You cannot consciously be thinking about how you're going to go on. If you're at the skateboard park, I've seen them. I mean, I don't do skateboarding myself, but I've seen people on skateboards at skateboard parks. They're really dexterous, and I am absolutely sure that they're not consciously thinking about what they're going to do as they're actually doing it, because they'd be falling off the skateboards left, right, and centre, and they're not. They are fully in the body when they're doing that. And if we want a good examples of what it looks like to be wholeheartedly given into what at this moment is being done, then looking at top athletes is a really good example of doing that. And it's interesting, I've seen tennis players, talking about top games, and they say, you're not thinking about the money, you're not even really thinking about winning. It's too immediate for that. Winning is something that happens in the future, but what's happening right now is just too immediate, and you can't be weighing up where you're going to hit the ball to and all that sort of thing either, because the whole situation is much more dynamic. It's the decisions are not deliberate in that way. That being at one with the functioning of the form of Rupa is not cognitive. It's something much bigger than that. So this is the giving myself. That's one situation where I naturally give myself wholeheartedly is when it's something that I really like or that I want to do. Then naturally I just give myself wholeheartedly into it. And what's more, it comes alive. So there's that sense of, time passing vanishes. There's a sense of vitality and aliveness to what is happening as well. And that's how we can see when a person is giving themselves wholeheartedly into it. Think of a singer. Think of a classical musician, playing a piano or playing a cello or a violin. That they use their bodies in a certain way. They've been trained to use their bodies in a certain way, and there's the music that they produce. The more that they are at one with what they are doing, then the feeling that is conveyed by what they're playing is above and beyond the mere technicality of playing the right notes in the right order. You can play music and it can be dead, but technically it can be it can be accurate. But if we're really given into it, if the heart is given into what at this moment is being done, then there is a warmth and a power that is conveyed, that is felt by those who are listening. And this is what the great musicians do, and it's what the great athletes do as well. They cause us to hold our breath as we're watching them, because we're drawn into that wholeheartedness that they are showing us as well. So that wanting to give myself wholeheartedly is one place where that happens. That giving myself happens quite naturally. There are two other things that also cause it to happen. One is if it's an emergency. This is sort of stepping out rather blindly from between two cars, and suddenly, a car suddenly bips its horn because it's having to brake hard not to hit you, and before thinking, you jump back. Go, oh my God, jump back. You didn't have to think about that jumping back. The body took over the activity. Again, Master Dai used to give the example of, slipping on the proverbial banana skin. So walking down, maybe, a million miles away, and you put your foot on a banana skin and your foot slips and you lose your balance. What's the first thing that happens? The first thing that happens is the body rights itself. The body has taken over. I didn't do that. I was away with the fairies. The body took over and righted itself. The next thing that happens is the emotional reaction. And the third thing that happens is slow coach I comes up with all my opinions. What fool left that banana skin there? Why don't they sweep this more often? The local council are rubbish. But that's way after the incident and way after the remedial action has been taken. The body took that over. The body is present, it sees, it responds immediately. This is known as the lightning flash of Zen. And it's really at that level. It's about allowing the heart to be at that level and being at one with. And this is a dance. It's not a control. This is why there is no I at this level. There cannot be. If there's an I, then I is always lagging behind um, with its emotions and its opinions. This is much more fundamental. So this is why the heart of the practice is really coming into this being at home in the body, which again was another favourite phrase of Master Dayu. She would often talk of just be at home in the body. Why can you not be friends with your own body in your own company without having to distract yourself? Why, what a pity that we cannot be friends and be at home in our own body. She would often say that. Useful that this is what we are doing in our practice, just taking time to sit in our comfortable armchair and just be at home with our own body, our own mind, just as it is, without being swept off by a distraction into some other place. So it's a useful thing. And so this being at home in the body, does suggest a sort of a natural resting place within ourselves, within our own, including particularly our own physical form. And interestingly, the Buddha talked of the four positions, the four classical positions in Buddhism, are known as sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. And they're referred to quite often in the suttas, and certainly in the Satipatthana Sutta as well, which gives the instructions for practice, for daily life practice. All these things that I've been talking about. And, he says, when the bhikkhu walks, he knows he's walking. When he sits, he knows he's sitting. When he lies, he knows he's lying down. When he stretches out his arm, he knows he's stretching out his arm. So this is all very clear. This knowing is that being at one with the act, with whatever the body is actually doing. So there it is. It's right there in the Buddha's own teaching in the Pali Canon there. And so those four positions are sort of used as a sort of catch-all phrase for everything that we do. I mean, it's not just sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. It's being at the computer. It's doing whatever it is that we need to do, making breakfast, opening and closing the fridge door, looking into the fridge to see what's there, and all that real wholeheartedness. But it is that wholeheartedness and that sincerity that we give to it, and by doing this over a period of time, we begin to accrue a new habit, a habit of being much more centered in the body, in the physical form itself, so that we can retreat there. When we find that everything in the mind is just driving us crazy, that we've become addicted again to the energy of the mind, we can suddenly recall that there is this other place, this place that's this deeper foundational place of being that comes before the thinking, that comes before my opinions of right and wrong, before my anxieties, before my desires too. And it's always here. It can be obscured by all those thoughts of those things, but it never disappears, not whilst there is breath still remaining in the body. Okay, we'll leave it there for now. Just a reminder of a couple of things. First of all, if you have a question for the troubleshooting series, then you can always send it over to Rinzai at thezengateway.com. Rinzai, Rinzai at thezengateway.com. We always welcome questions, and who knows, your question could be featured if you send it over, so please do. The other thing is that obviously this program is going out at the end of November, and we have some good news coming up, which is that shortly, in a few weeks, we will be opening up a subscription to a new service, which is an online community, which as you know, we've been providing Dharma for individuals and also for groups for quite a number of years now. But one of the things that's come to our attention is that people would like to, be able to join in a little bit more, perhaps, talk to a teacher like myself about their own meditation or daily life practice, but they don't have a place to go because they don't live close to a temple or to a Dharma center or even to a meditation group, and would like a little bit of contact with other like-minded people. So if you'd like news about the new project or to be kept informed as we go along, then please go over to thezengateway.com, and there on our homepage you can subscribe to our newsletter. We send a newsletter out once a week, and that way you can stay informed about all developments. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll leave it there for this month.